make this happen. Welcome to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, which you take one big book, read it, talk about it, shoot the shit, make jokes, drink a little. Is that a good enough intro, Brian?
Yeah, that works.
There we go. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox.
Yep, a little hungover today, but I just took a walk, sweated out a little bit, and rehydrating, so we're good. Good to go.
I had to edit an article for the LA Times this morning, and I was like, Irish coffee. So I'm good. We're all doing well. So this is.
Do you get nervous? I know, like sometimes you do stuff for like Publishers Weekly or large periodicals and stuff. Is it nerve-wracking to like get that, or do you know you're going to be edited and so you won't look like too much of a dumbass? Or
there's a couple. There's a lot of reactions. My main reaction is that I want to write something and be essentially done with it. And like whatever people can make it better, but I don't want to reread it. It's like listening to a podcast again. Like I won't ever listen to this podcast. I like doing it, but I don't want to have to invest in it. And so when it comes back, when they edit it, I'm really happy with the people at PW who are just like, we've just rewritten this into this form. I'm like, cool, works for me, looks good. The other times where they're like, well, I've left some parts that you need to clarify. I'm like, oh no, like I'm sure that I was like making no sense. But this, I opened it up and I was going through and it was like a few minor things, but it wasn't that big of a deal. So it was actually really good. I think Boris Kashka is the person who edited it, and he's a really good editor for these sorts of essays and articles. He's really strong, just as like a shout out to Boris. But also I'm having drinks because I won an award today.
What's that?
I won an award.
You did? For what? I
did, for my contributions to Catalan culture.
That's amazing. Wow. Congratulations.
I forgot what the name of it was right now. Let me just double check. It is the, what is it called actually? It has a name for it, but it's from the Omnium Cultural Foundation. It's the J.B. Cendros Award for contributions to Catalan culture. And apparently they've been primarily giving it over the past 6-7 years to politicians because they have like a little politician problem over there right now. The director of this foundation would have called me to tell me that I won it, except he's in jail for 7 years because he's Catalan and he supported independence.
Sounds about right. That sounds about right.
Yeah, so I have to record an acceptance speech. Jill Schoolman won it as well. Just to make this clear, Jill Schoolman and I both won it jointly. But we have to send in an acceptance speech because on Catalan public TV they'll be broadcasting the awards ceremony and including our bit. So
congratulations to you both. That's incredible. Are you going to put like an actual shirt on that doesn't say Boomer or?
This is Doomed.
Oh, I thought it said Boomer. Sorry.
It'd be funnier. Boomer would be perfect. No, Doomed, because it is. Doomed seemed like the most appropriate 2020 and ARDOR shirt I could find.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It is about time and pain. That is for sure.
Totally. Have you seen the Match.com ad with Ryan Reynolds and the devil in 2020?
No, I have not.
It's pretty funny, but the main bit is that the devil on Match.com in the beginning of 2020 gets matched up with the year 2020 and starts dating, and everything's going to shit. And she's like, "Where are you from?" He's like, "Hell," and she's like, "Me too." And then it's like, "We don't want this year to ever end." It's like things are just like destroying.
Yeah, I think you or Kaya sent it to me. I haven't looked at it yet, but I got it on my phone. I thought it was a screenshot from Ridley Scott's Legend. Remember that movie?
Deadpool 3.
Yeah. Do you remember that movie, Legend?
Oh no.
It's got Tom Cruise in it, and he plays like an elf or something. And there's I think Tim Curry, plays like a giant Satan.
Oh my God.
It's not Tim Curry, but I don't know. But as a kid, I just thought it was. But you don't remember that? Oh my God, you need to watch that with your kids, dude.
Okay, will do. It's better than True. Which are currently what we watch on Netflix all the time, in which they go to a wishing tree and make wishes and they come true.
Okay, cool.
No.
My daughter, she's 5. She has a new favorite show, and it's called Full Bloom, and it's Project Runway, except clothes. They're doing flowers and floral arrangements, and she's like obsessed with this show. I don't know why. He's like absolutely obsessed with whose flowers are gonna get them cut off and clipped and pruned from the show or whatever. She
Amazing.
I don't know. It's weird. She's totally obsessed. So our new craft time is to go buy flowers and make arrangements and stuff. So that's it could be totally worse. So
it could be way worse. It could be
meth. I'm glad she chose dahlias.
It's like Real Housewives.
Yeah, exactly.
So this season we've been talking about ARDOR by Vladimir Nabokov, and today's a special episode in which we've already finished the book, but we read a couple essays, 3 essays about it to try and get like some critical or scholarly perspective. Essays ranged in tone and emphasis quite a bit. So I think I'm gonna make a warning. I'm gonna make a general trigger warning. If you're an academic and you're listening to this, just know that I don't mean anything about you. Okay?
Sure. Okay.
But I really don't like academic writing. like very much don't like it.
I think that's could be like, I mean, obviously it's your opinion, so that's fine. But like, do you think it's because you're coming from a completely different way of looking at books than like maybe a PhD or somebody writing a thesis is going to be viewing a piece of literature?
Yes and no. I mean, part of it's that, part of it's not. So let's start with the one I have to find really quick, which is Ada on the science fiction one, because this is the one where it's the biggest example for me of like, this is the sort of writing in academia that I do not care for.
And so the source, that one's from, is it from DePauw?
The author is Roy Arthur Swanson. Mm-hmm. It's online in like full bold for some fucking reason, which I do not know. But where is he from? It doesn't have a bio on here. I don't know who he is. It's in a magazine called Science Fiction Studies. So basically, this essay by Roy Arthur Swanson, who is quite possibly a translator who is 95 years old and lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and is a professor emeritus from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So the premise of this is his attempt to make Ada into a science fiction by talking about how it uses 3 eversions, like rather than inversions or any other word, this eversion, which I had not heard of. I don't know if this is a term, but it feels like a term that was made up for science fiction, where it's like things that are inverted or changed or transformed or transmogrified in some way. By doing that with like time, place, and gender, it becomes a work of science fiction. And then he tries to really shoehorn in the Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. And that's the moment where like, I don't think it's because I'm coming at it from a different place, because I've also tried to write things where you take 2 things that don't work together and jam them together and try and force that to make sense so that you can make some point. Like I do that on every post. And that doesn't mean that I'm a fucking smart. Like that doesn't mean that it's fucking right. And like this really felt like a real strain to try and get to like a lot of effort to try and get to like this being science fiction. Like the gender one in particular was a section that bothered me.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was curious. I mean, I like, I thought maybe it's just like trying to find, because everyone's going to talk about time, obviously, is really easy to talk about with this. And there's tons of examples. Or pleasure and pain is very easy to talk about. Or heaven and hell is very easy to talk about. And so I think maybe he's just trying to find a different angle or something interesting. One, it's more likely to be published or something like that. But yeah, I see what you mean, where it's just kind of stretching a little bit, perhaps. But
I also don't think that like the writing in the 2 of the 3 of the articles that we talked about is very dry. And like that is the academic ease sort of part. And yeah, I do come at it, and that way I totally agree with you. I come from a different point of view of like talking about books in an interesting way that's engaging, rather than talking about it in an arid way that's like scholarly.
Sure.
Like I don't find that impressive. I find it more impressive. I think it's harder to entertain people than it is to appear smart.
Sure. I don't know. In some ways, like it kind of reminds me of like, because I ran into this during my MFA when you would, take literature courses with some of the PhD and MA students, and we'd look at the same book completely different. Like I noticed we'd be looking at the same book from completely different points of view.
Yeah.
Not that either of us is right or wrong necessarily, but just I'm kind of coming at it. I was like, how did they do this?
Yeah.
Or like, why did they do this? Not necessarily what does it mean, or like, it's almost like how a food critic is going to taste a plate of food versus another chef or a cook eating a chef's food, right? Like one person's like deconstructing and like putting it in their mind, like, how did this come together? While the other is like, how can I talk about this and say I either like it or don't like it? And for what reasons do I like it or not like it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I totally agree.
And that's kind of like a lot of times I love reading academic critiques, because a lot of times I'm just like, man, they really went down the weeds on this one, like, they get the scent of something and just like chase it. And it's like, I think you might have missed a little bit about what everything is going. I don't know. I could be wrong, but like, I just definitely do not view this or try to like, the lens of science fiction for me on this book doesn't make any sense to me.
Agreed. Like there's the science fiction element of there being like his idea that things are changed, that Terra and anti-Terra are like that's an evert. Yeah. The gender thing I think is a real stretch, where it's like Ada is Adam and Eve is Van because of the V's and the A's, is like, oh, I guess like I don't think that there was like a lot of like gender fluidity in this book. It's pretty conventional in its like representations of males and females.
I thought so as well. I mean, there is the whole thing of like the two of them becoming one.
Yeah.
And I guess that could be genderless at that point when what was the word, Vanada or
Vaniata?
Yeah, where it's the two names that are coming together, like in their old age when they're finally able to like have that bliss and be together. I could see that part of it, I guess, but I don't know. Maybe it falls apart when you start adding all the butterfly stuff into it. If you want to go down, I'm not an entomologist, so I don't understand, or lepidopterist or whatever. I don't know about the whole life cycles of butterflies and the metamorphosis or whatever, but it felt a little bit of a stretch. I don't, not that it matters. I mean, these are just like little boxes to put things in, but to me, it felt more postmodern than science fiction. If I were to categorize it as something.
It's weird. The science fiction thing comes up in the second essay too, but I'm going to read one paragraph. This paragraph is essentially what I was like, this is where I checked out. Eversion is, in science fiction, a means of communication, and in Ada it communicates, among other things, the very nature of a communication gap. We are led to consider that during the 1960s, the great loss of subjective verbal contact between generations was brought about by the beginning of modern civilization's ability to extend communication through galactic space. The duration of this ability has been labeled the L factor. This factor, as it is identified and outlined in Walter Sullivan's We Are Not Alone, poses the paradox that for civilizations which are technologically advanced enough to communicate across galactic space, there's a tendency either to be destroyed by the technology that has made the communication possible, or to be so changed by the technology as to lose interest in the communication. In either of which cases, the L factor becomes a small number, indicating short duration of the ability. In Ada, the Terra-anti-Terra dichotomy, I know I'm already asleep too, represents the phenomenon of the 1960s, namely the inception of the ability to achieve extraterrestrial communication, the beginning of the space age, which will be the period during which this ability is sustained. As the pocket of communication is turned outward, its contents of interterrestrial communication are lost proportionately. As they disappear, Terra, relegated to nostalgia, becomes as fanciful as a myth as the Estotaland on the late 16th century map of the Zeno brothers' Scorpamiento. Okay, whatever. The L factor in Ada is the L disaster or electrocalamity, and the reaction to it is a prohibition of the electronic communication with extended verbal contact at the cost of the subjective verbal contact. And I was like, fuck this.
I completely disagree, but that's fine.
Yeah, that with him or with me?
With him.
I do too.
And again, I'm really annoyed because reading these essays, I have to reread this book now.
Yeah.
Because I'm like convinced it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And I really want to just kind of like bask and enjoy how brilliant it is, and can't do that on the first reading of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely have to reread it now. So I'm going to try to fit that in right before we do next season's JR.
Yeah. Got plenty of time.
No, like I thought the whole like Terra and anti-Terra is more of like the actual author Nabokov working out like memory, and this is what I lost and what was taken away from me, and so this is the idyllic place of how it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's French and Russian and English being spoken and interweaved at like any given moment, right? And this academic discourse and discussing things through art. I mean, they're awful, terrible, aristocratic people, obviously, but there's like this idealized world, and yet the other one, Terra, still does exist, but it's like this dream, like this bubble, this like special. I don't think it has anything to do with L factor communication. Intergalactics.
The one part that I agree with is the idea that like we create a communication that will either destroy us or that will bum us out. It's the main theory. I'm like, yeah, that's true. No, like they altered everything through phones, and they destroy us and bum us out.
I've seen Star Trek, dude. V'ger comes to get you. Look out for V'ger. It's a giant space orgasm coming to just fuck you up.
So the one interesting part of that is I did reference in that essay the idea that Vaughn and Ada are brother and sister, which we only really cottoned on to when someone watching this told us during the live show that we hadn't figured that out. And then we figured
out this later. We just hadn't got the hints yet.
Except the hint is on page 25.
Yeah.
So this is the paragraph. At one time, Aqua believed that a stillborn male infant, half a year old, a surprised little fetus, a fish of rubber that she had produced in her bath, in a lieu de naissance plainly marked X in her dreams, after skiing at full pulver into a larch stump, had somehow been saved and brought to her at the Nuss house with her sister's compliments, wrapped up in a blood-soaked cotton wool, but perfectly alive and healthy, to be registered as her son Ivan Veen. At other moments, she felt convinced that the child was her sister's, born out of wedlock during an exhausting yet highly romantic blizzard in a mountain refuge on Sex Rogue, where Dr. Al Alpiner, a general practitioner and gentian lover, sat providentially waiting near a rude red stove for his boots to dry. Okay, so that was a lot, but like that's it. There it is. It's right there, page 25. But when you first read those chapters, it was like trying to get your bearings as to where the fuck are we? And there's so much detail and information that part of like that she had a stillborn baby and they replaced it with Vaughn didn't register.
Yeah, this stillborn baby swap, I totally forgot. Like I do not remember reading that paragraph.
I don't either. I have marks around it.
I do remember hitting the tree. I remember that. But for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe like as a parent or something, like you just thinking about stillborn children and baby swaps. Like I just did not, I don't remember that.
You know what it might've been too, is in some ways that this whole chapter is describing how she's insane.
Yeah.
And part of her insanity is that at one time she believed there was an infant that was a fish of rubber that became her son. Like it seemed like a delusion.
Yeah, it felt like very fever dreamed, and
even
the way it's written, like it's so wordy and crazy, but isn't that? And it's discussed in one of the other essays we read. Like that's kind of like part of like the trick of this book too, is what's real, what is not real, the artificial and the and reality, like next to each other, and that constant juxtaposition, like. The example of the person that puts real roses in with the fake flowers to draw people in to buy the fake flowers.
Yeah. Right? Remembering that and talking about that made it really,
what an insane metaphor for what a book is.
Yeah.
Or what memory is, or like, it's so beautiful. It's so freaking brilliant. Like
It really is.
I have to reread this stupid book.
It's so annoying that it is this good.
I'm so
and it is like that. It comes down in the end. There's one other really important note that I think is in the okay. So the second essay, so that one science fiction one, whatever. The second one that we read that I also have issues with, but I'll tell you what they are in a second. Is it was for a PhD. Is by Dwight Yates for his PhD at the University of Montana, and it's called Nabokov. Or I mean, I don't know what it is. What he's doing? Who cares? Nabokov's Ada and the Texture of Time, and it's
written on a typewriter.
And it's written on a fucking typewriter. But like, not only is it written on a fucking typewriter, but anyone's watching. I don't know if you can see it, but the way that he included the block quotes are in frickin' italics. Like, it's like the least readable font that I've ever seen. Like, it's an academic essay.
This is before MLA format, I think. So.
Ooh. But this one does reference one thing I thought that was really interesting was about the structure of the book as a whole as being a spiral. And structures are one of the things I'm really obsessed with in books. And the more that it said that, it's like, yeah, it does make sense because it does come back to things in these like certain repetitions, but they've always sort of changed a little bit. Even the difference between the first time he goes to artists and the second time that they get together, everything's gone from like idyllic to horrific. And that kind of keeps cycling. I like that metaphor. The rest of it about time, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of people who've written about time. And I think Nabokov's idea of time is fascinating, but I don't know that this essay is fascinating. The essay is just kind of dry.
Yeah. I probably went down, it wasn't this essay, but I did like the idea of being referenced. I think it was by perhaps Boyd. I want to get his, Brian Boyd is referenced a lot in one of the other.
He wrote the two biographies.
Okay. Mentioning that I believe it was part 4 was written first.
Yep.
Right. And everything like that is the kernel that everything grows out of is that, right?
Yes.
And I was really fascinated by the interview with Nabokov talking about how, so I've written this, or I have to write this to make everything else work. And
oh, okay. So I can tell you here. Okay. So the major works of Brian Boyd. Oh shit. I've got something else you should read. So Brian Boyd's main works on Nabokov, there are trillions, but there are Vladimir Nabokov, the Russian years, and then the American years. And those are the 2 volumes of the biography that I've seen before. I had checked out the American one or the Russian one, but I never read it. And then also wrote Ada, The Place of Consciousness in 1985. So I'll bet you that's awesome.
So he might know a thing or two.
Yeah, I think he's down. He also wrote on Pale Fire, The Magic of the Artistic Discovery. He wrote on Nabokov's Butterflies, Unpublished and Uncollected Writings, or he edited it.
So he's the Harold Bloom of Vladimir Nabokov?
Yeah, he edited the Letters to Vera. Yeah, so he's locked in. So yeah, so his book on Ada would probably be really interesting. If we still had libraries, I could check that out, but
yeah, because I remember when we read part 4. I mean, it's basically his novella, right?
Yeah,
it's the book within the book. And when we read part 4, that was when we were like, "What in the world?" And we read fast, and it's this crazy like pseudo academic philosophical ramblings on time.
Yeah, and
it was interesting because in the interview, Nabokov was saying how he struggled. You know, like. This was a struggle you have to come up with some kind of like academic paper on time. So I got to like figure out how to like write this thing to make everything else work. And like on the tiniest of levels, I completely sympathize with that feeling of, I remember I had to write an essay in the voice of a smart 17-year-old that gets like 3rd place in an essay contest.
Oh, wow.
And so like, I'm trying to like write like a kind of a good essay, but it has to have like the thoughts of a smart 17-year-old, which I mean, really, what are those, right? And like,
yeah,
being in that space and then writing it and like having it passable, but it can't be in the same voice. Like So it's a fun challenge. I mean, nothing on the level of this, obviously.
But similar, yeah.
But it's like the linchpin that's going to hold everything together, right?
Right. And Nabokov does throughout the in that essay, it does reference a lot of stuff from Strong Opinions, which I have not read, to be honest. That's like one of the books I just haven't read of his, but about his thoughts on time. And that it seems to like Vaughn's paper sort of mirrors his actual beliefs to some degree. And it sort of stems from this like trauma of losing the home, of losing his homeland and losing that idyllic moment. Creates a sense of like, well, like in a way that makes the future so weird, they just eliminates the future.
Yeah, I think like a perfect quote to go with that. See if I can pull it up fast enough. I'll do it over here. One of the things that, as I'm looking it up, one of the things that I was kind of like maybe a little drunk when the thought came to me was this idea of like the actual physical, like time having a physical texture to it.
Yeah.
And I think, doesn't he reference like in the essay about in Vaughn's essay that like time is like you hear it, or like time is with the ear?
Yeah. Because it's a passage, so rhythm.
Okay.
There's rhythm of time versus, and I think that's one of the. So there's two things that really interested me about the time Nabokov's thinking on time in relation to this. One was the idea that there is no future, that there's only the present moment, which is like another one of these essays could be like Ada as Buddhism, of like there's the present moment, the memories of the past, and how you remember that stuff impacts your present moment, but there's no future. And that's like also, I believe it's in that essay, but Bergson's theory that that's how you get to like free will, is if there's no future, then you have
there is a Vaughn in Nirvana.
That is true.
Right?
But, dude, I bet you we could write a spoof academic essay on this that would just, be published. Like called The Vaughn and Nirvana. Just go with it.
Oh, man.
But the other thing, what was the other thing I was going to say about it was the other thing I think is really interesting is trying to divorce time and discussions of time from spatial metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really interesting because we do tend to say things like time's like a river, or like that, there's a lot of spatial elements to time, and that we use as a reference point because of like space, time, and whatnot, and trying to eliminate that and just think of time as its own entity, not spatial, but like something other than spatial, where you can hear it and there's the rhythm and it's essentially the passage, the changing of things, but that also implies that it's spatial as well. So like it is interesting to try and think about time without having any reference to physical space.
Yeah, because when I was thinking about like how time can have a texture, like to me, when I was wrapping my head around it, it's almost as if like it has to stop. Like how else could you like feel it or know it, or like it, and you keep seeing, especially in this book, like just complete frozen moments of time that you're moving around and like getting every detail and every like touch, feel, sensation, these like super tender, intimate moments that are just completely frozen.
Yeah.
And like out of place and like strange, like that was like that to me. That had that feeling like the texture of time, or those like just joyous, exuberant, crazy moments of dipping into the past.
Yeah.
It's never in anything present.
And that sort of like bounces off the idea that when we were going through of talking about like cinema and photography and memories,
mm-hmm.
like those things as being elements of like a recording of time passing. They're a record of time, and yet they're not the memories. And the memories are always valued, even though the memories are less physical and are clearly just like time sensitive in a way.
Yeah, like here's a great quote I love from one of the essays. In Ada, both time and space are metaphoric, and it goes down a little bit further. How, when talking about losing, that mother, that home, and then wanting to get it back, and how important the past is, how little we valued our paradise.
Yeah.
I loved it more pointedly, more consciously. And then a little bit above that, mother, we must return, mustn't we? It cannot be that this has all died, turned to dust. Such an idea would drive one mad. Every little bush, every stalk in our divine park at Vira, but no one can understand this. Like,
I like that quite a bit too.
Yeah, and I feel like that was artists in this book, right?
There was somewhere
in the slice of paradise and like wanting to get back to that at all costs, right?
Yeah. Isn't this essay have something about the artist is like an anagram for something? Artist.
The Montana.
What's that?
The Montana.
Yeah.
Essay. I don't know. I fell asleep 3 times reading it, unfortunately.
It's really hard to read. I skimmed the shit out of this. Like, to be honest, it's so dull. Like, I love the thing that I do love about it, though. I have to point this out. This person's probably not listening. So
it was written in like 1960 something.
Yeah, like I think it's 1971 because the book came out in 1969. But it's like right there. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's like immediately referring to the scholarship of it. So whatever. But that every chapter of his, every section of this essay ends with a numerological list or numbered list of like his points from it, just to summarize them. That's
for the book club.
That's the biggest like dick swing I've seen in like a paper in a long time. Just to summarize, here are points 1 through 7 of what I just said. Woo!
Those folks from Montana, baby.
Yeah, fuck yeah, Montana. No, but there is something artist. It's like artist place or artist, whatever the full title of it is an anagram for something else. But I can't think of what it was now. Missing it and not finding it in here. But yeah, this is a tough one. So you want to talk about the fun one, the one that was the best?
Let's get to the good one.
Get to the good one.
What was this book? What is it? Just briefly describe. What was this book? You sent me the chapter of it, but
I don't know where my cover went. But this is it's a hardcover book that came out from Yale last year. It was last January of 2019, and it's called That Other World by Azar Nafisi, who's famous for reading Lolita in Tehran. And what's the other book that she wrote that's really important? Can't think of it, but it's another one that had it was about literature in Iran and reading these sorts of books in that sort of society. And so she taught in Iran. I think that's where most of when she talks about teaching in here, I think it's teaching there, but she does teach at Stanford or somewhere here in the States now. But this was her PhD thesis, and that she wrote for her PhD, and it was written in Persian and just was translated for the first time ever last year. So it's from ages ago. It was it says she copyrighted it in 1994. And it just came out now. It literally is, the introduction explains that it is her thesis. And then she's sort of touched it up. But
I would love to reach out to her because this was I thought it was a very brilliant chapter from this. I got to get her book. I have to read it now.
The book is really, really good. I've been reading it slowly over the past essentially 2 years because I started with so it has I don't know why I would have skipped this, but the first chapter is on speak memory. But after that, every other book that she wrote about in the chapters, I read the Nabokov book and then read her chapter.
Oh, so
speak memory.
It's so good.
The Gift, Look at the Harlequins, The Real Life of Sebastian Knight, Invitation to Beheading, Ben Sinister, Pnin, Pale Fire, Lolita, and then ARDOR is the last one. And
so yeah, we're referencing chapter 7 from this book, Heaven and Hell, out of order.
Yep. And I want to read you one thing though so the chapter before it is about Lolita, right? And somewhere here, if I can find it, I just circled the line and put 2-month review. Let's do it because there's something that was so fitting to what we had been talking about and sort of going around in circles about, but she nails it. Where is it? Yeah.
Was this thesis PhD? Was it from Yale? Because I know she mentions a professor at Yale in this chapter. Is that where she was doing her post?
The book came out from Yale, but I don't think that she's involved with Yale. I might be wrong. I could be totally wrong. I should have looked it up. I met her once in the Abu Dhabi Book Fair. Ed Nawat and I interviewed her for the daily newsletter from the Abu Dhabi Book Fair, and she was like wonderful, like absolutely like warm, gracious, really cool, really smart. And like, I've always wanted to like read her books for that reason. And that's why when this came out, I was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity to like really read something of hers that's not, that's to connect to something I'm obsessed with. I found it. So here is what I wanted to read from the Lolita chapter. Nabokov writes to fill the void of exile. He loves the English language and uses it to perfection. Lolita is his crowning accomplishment, recreating his own idiosyncratic prose style in English. Unlike Humbert, he does not seek to revive his lost love in another. He makes use of Russian's range of possibilities to enrich his English. He may seemingly never possess Jane Austen's flawless register or the deceptively simple, graceful ease of Henry James, but Nabokov's portmanteau English is beautifully distinctive, incorporating everything he has lost in life, his memory of Russia and the Russian language. And that I wanted to mention because last week I said the thing about Gore Vidal, saying that he didn't write, and Nabokov didn't write in English, that he didn't write English at all. He wrote his own hybrid of things, and that sort of pops up then again right there. But there's a lot of stuff in her book. It's really good. She's really smart, and she does a great job of like sort of summarizing the books in ways, and then like teasing out aspects of like how he plays with like mirrors and doubles and different acts of point of view, and it's fantastic. But yeah, so what did you like about the ARDOR chapter?
Well, one, it made me just like exuberant to want to read it again. Her passion and her love for Nabokov's work, just it's infectious in the way she writes. I think it's so wonderful when you come across somebody that just makes you really excited to like nerd out what they're into. And so I love that. But two, I thought she just was so poignant and clear in describing like all the dualities that are taking place within this book simultaneously, which is just, it's insane. This book is insane.
The book is super insane, and like reading through her. I mean, it's been a long time, but like
obviously there's heaven and hell, like stuff we picked up on, right? Like Eden and being outcast. There's pleasure and there's pain. There's artificial and real. There's memory and there's time. There's
space.
Yeah, and all of these things, this continuous, prolonged, amazing metaphor that just works and is balanced, and like the perfect little butterfly. Like the guy is out of control. Like so stinking good.
It's wild.
It's wild. But it's like how pleasurable the line, just on a line level, how pleasurable it is to read Nabokov's work. And there's that.
Yeah. He was a master and in control of everything.
And I do like that she brought up that, yeah, there's a lot of like games and fun, but it's not to like make you feel like you're missing out. Like you can totally not get any of those and you're going to be fine. You're okay.
I'm going to make what probably isn't a controversial statement, but might seem as such, but is that like the two males that wrote about this are really trying to prove that they understand all those secrets and all the little tricks and games. And she's writing about, she's embodied in this essay in a way that they don't embody themselves in their essays at all. They literally are the academic aridness of writing, and the thing that I dislike. She is very much like, I'm writing this now, here's what I've finally come to this chapter. I'm going back to this book for like the 90th time, and tells like her story of how it was the first book that she read. She's like part of the essay, and it gives so much more life and space to being able to talk about it in like a rational, good way. And like what you're saying about like, you don't need to know all those tricks. You don't need to understand all of them to understand and appreciate the book on a sentence level, plot level, theme level. And the other essays sort of like lean into, oh, we're going to explain this. We're going to articulate these parts. And I think that that's one of the things I find so refreshing about her.
Yeah.
And her writing is that that's entertaining and smart. That's the key. I don't think you need to be anything more than entertaining and smart.
Well, like to me, it's like actual intelligence about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can describe something in a way that like is so infectious and like alluring to the reader, like you actually know the thing. And you don't have to like be this authority about it, or try to be an authority about it, or be legalistic about this is what it is, and here's the proof, and like come at me. like it's not that at all. Like the way she talked about like this book, like again, I was like, I gotta read it again now. And I don't know. That's the way we need to talk. That's the way we need to, I think, critically talk about literature. This is a fantastic way of doing it. Like how each time she's reading it, it's changing and it has a new meaning. And I absolutely love that. And that you're not the same person reading this book the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth time, and you could be at a different place and you'll have a different feeling from it.
Yeah,
and that's what I think great works of art do. And this clearly is a great work of art. But I agree. She comes at it so casually, but at the same like clearly she has like tremendous authority to be talking about this book.
Yeah.
But she does it so just like inviting and wonderfully and at ease. Like it makes you feel comfortable to like feel dumb about the book.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I really like about it, because I feel really dumb about this book.
I'm going to read two bits really quick from here. So I'll do it in reverse order to segue. So part 3 of the essay on 262 begins, during the autumn days I've spent rewriting this last chapter on Ada, I have also been thinking of when 2 decades ago I read Ada for the first time and gradually discovered Nabokov. At the time, I could never have imagined that I would come to write about Ada. Nevertheless, something must have been percolating even then. With Ada, my present time has always encompassed my future expectations, and it remains the case. I've returned to Ada after every fundamental change in my life. This novel always causes me to combine and reconsider unrelated times and different relationships. Ada finds an acceptable association of them. That spring when I was 20 and I had just discovered Ada has the green and red background of an unforgettable natural world, or so it is in my memory. The red soil and the wide brooks that turn the ground into a gigantic chessboard, reminiscent of the world of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Like that's such a like amazing, like very personal and very much like what you're saying of like she's read it several times, she goes back to it several times. It's like very friendly. But the part on the texture of time in here, I think her one paragraph on this, which is a bit long, but bear with me, does a million times better than the whole other essay that was from Montana.
Yeah.
Multi-directional reality applies equally to the inset narrative of Vaughan's treaty and the greater world of the novel itself. Nabokov's descriptive style weaves this metaphoric vision into the texture of every scene in Ada. Every moment involves another moment, and every scene another scene. So much so that thinking uniquely in terms of heroes or villains, protagonists or antagonists, is meaningless, because Terra cannot be thought of without anti-Terra, nor hell without heaven. Vaughan's The Texture of Time is a structural trick. It has no existence beyond the framework of Ada. Time, one of Nabokov's key themes, probably more than for any other of the great novelists of his era, refutes the realism of the 19th century novel that moved forward on the basis of linear time, a narration seemingly incongruous in the 20th century. The tradition of the 19th century English language novel developed greater complexity and ambiguity with Henry James's narrative art. The 20th century novel engaged with the notion of time in a central way. Proust added the texture of individual memory, Joyce the texture of collective memory. Nabokov's idea of the texture of time was not the same as Proust's lost time, but something that can be felt, handled even, in everyday life. Few writers have infused time with the level of wonder and enchantment that Nabokov did in his work. As Vaughan explains, quote, time is a fluid medium for the culture of metaphors. And it's like, fuck yeah, that I'm down for. I'm with you there. That is interesting. This whole other 56-page thesis, no, not so much. Not so much at all. Yeah, I think she's wonderful. I highly recommend this book. There might be out in paperback now. I just got it as a review copy like a long time ago and written about it on the blog a few times, but I think it's really worth it. If you're a Nabokov fan, you'll just enjoy it. Like even
because I'm grabbing her book and I'm going to read each novel and read each chapter. Like that's going to be,
it's super.
The first quarter of my 2020 is going to be definitely doing that.
2021? We're finally done with this year almost.
Nah, man, I love 2020. Why would I want to leave it? I gotta tell you, I've been watching a lot of dystopian sci-fi as of late, but the stuff from like the 80s and 90s, we're not doing that bad.
No.
I just watched Cyborg, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, in which a pandemic ravages all of America, and they have to get to Atlanta to give the cure, right? But here's what doesn't make any. This is a great just aside, I think. Here's what doesn't make sense about this movie. I think it takes place right around 2020 time frame. What doesn't make any sense about this movie is, like, apparently there's no internet, there's no email, and so the only way to get this information from New York City to Atlanta is to build a cyborg and put it inside the cyborg brain and just like have the cyborg walk from New York to Atlanta and hope that, like, you know, post-apocalyptic pirates don't, you know, kidnap your cyborg and ransom the cure for money or whatever. Like, what idiotic, like, what a dumb way. Like, you can't put on a carrier pigeon and just have it fly. You have to make a cyborg? But wait, you can make a cyborg, but you can't, like, send an email? What is that? The one I watched, it takes place in 2021. It's called Johnny Mnemonic.
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking of when you first started talking. But I've read the book.
What's that?
I've only read Neuromancer.
Yeah, it's based off of Gibson, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Johnny Mnemonic, where in the year 2021, there's the Black Death going on, which gives you the shakes. So it's like a COVID virus, Parkinson's or something. I don't know. It's something terrible.
Parkin COVID?
Yeah. The cure for that is inside of like a sentient dolphin that's hooked up to the virtual reality internet or something. But in this world, again, you can't send an email because it'll get like hacked or something. Right. So you have to implant data into people's brains. Like, you wet wire a hard drive into your brain, and that's the only way to carry information. And the most that you can put into somebody, if they have a doubler, is 250 gigabytes.
I have 250 gigabytes in my, like, music file right now.
That's like a thumb drive you get for free at a hiring fair at a booth, right? I've got 250 gigs in my brain. It's leaking into it. Like, you know, so like that's the time crunch, because he's gonna have total seepage of all of that information in his brain. Poor Keanu. So that's 2021. We're doing fine. We're doing totally fine. Yeah, we can just send an email and fix stuff. The Trump vaccine is on its way. We're gonna be okay.
We can't keep people out of the hospitals. Emails. We're good.
Yeah, we don't have a dolphin or a terrible cyborg.
There is a How Did This Get Made episode on Johnny Mnemonic.
Okay.
You should listen. Like, it's super fun, if I remember right.
And Cyborg is a Canon film, and I cannot recommend Canon films enough. As long as you're not triggered by everything, Canon films are wonderful. They're so vile. They're incredible.
They just don't. Those ones are like just fast and loose and don't care about anything, right? I've heard about this before.
Yeah, no, it's like two Israeli dudes that just made stuff on the cheap. Like, everything involved a terrorist that's trying to kill people from Israel, and Chuck Norris has to kill all of the Arabs. Like, that's half of Canon films is Chuck Norris on an airplane shooting people with an Uzi.
Oh my god.
People will get kicked. Like, how do we get somebody that can do karate kicks to kick somebody in the face? Let's make this movie.
There we go. Done.
No, they went bankrupt off of two movies. Sylvester Stallone, Over the Top. They overpaid for Sylvester Stallone.
That was one of their. That movie is amazing.
Yeah, you win custody of your kid through arm wrestling.
Yeah, arm wrestling is a sport.
And they lost their shit on Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, I think. That's the one where a Chippendales dancer that can't act plays the villain. But I don't know. That was a long aside to say 2020, we are doing fine. I've been watching sci-fi films. We're doing okay.
We're hanging in there. Hanging in. It's interesting. I wonder what will happen. Wait, this is also a side note, but there was a time back in like 2011, 2012-ish that a lot of like literary people or like high-minded artists came out with things that related to like an apocalypse or a darkness. And it was basically like this assumption that like Obama would never win. And like everyone had been working on stuff in like the George W. Bush years, and like what was next would be worse, and that Obama wouldn't win. So it was like this great terror that kind of came out through artworks, and it was like very interesting, like how the different people, like Margaret Atwood's trilogy starts then. Then the Gary Steingart super sad true love story is then. Like there's a bunch of these like semi-literary, or I mean both of them are literary, but like those people that wrote these kind of like dystopic novels. And I felt like that was the fear they were addressing. Like even the TV show 24 was like, we have to go so far that because the world can be so much worse if we end up with like the next George W. Bush. And so they had like a nuclear bomb go off in episode 1. And that was the end of the show. Cause it was like, well, we just made the biggest thing happen. Like, no, there's no way you can get higher. But I'm curious to see, like, after 2020 and after Trump, like, what are the artists going to be doing now? Like, what is the fear going to be? Is it going to be celebratory because we went through something really dark? Or is it going to be like, what is the next dark thing? Are we going to have our dystopians going to be like dystopian books going to have to be like really realistic since we have like a better sense of what that could be than we did before?
I got everybody. Cormac McCarthy's The Road for Christmas.
Fucking hate that book. That came out around that time too. I didn't think about that book up until like the last 10 pages, in which I think it's the most fucking stupid, shitty, horrible ending of any book, and that whoever edited that should like literally lose their job. I'm talking to you, whoever you are at Vintage Random House. You probably already, it doesn't matter. You're like part of some super conglomerate that doesn't give a shit about anything. Like,
there we go, full circle. And you can read about it on Chad's piece in the LA Times coming out who knows when.
Who knows? But yeah.
But no, I'm going to be rereading ARDOR or ARDOR, and I'm pretty sure this is going to end up being one of my like top 10 books of all time. I think like it's crazy good. Like this book's insane.
The more I think about it, the more I really like it.
Yeah, I kind of hated it at first, and boy, I'm liking it more and more the more I think about it. And
like during this process season, where I'd be like, oh shit, I have to read Ada, and be like, there's like 45 pages, and it's gonna take so long, and it's so dense. And then I'd like get into it and be like, oh fuck, I really like this. This is really enjoyable.
Yeah.
And then it'd be fun. And then the next week I'd go through that same thing. And now that we're done with it, it's like, no, it's actually really good. Like I understand Rodrigo's never going to read it, but Rodrigo should probably read it.
He's missing out.
He's missing out. So as a segue, we're going on next season is going to be JR by William Gaddis. This is the New York Review of Books edition, which is 700 and some pages long, 60, I don't even know, 69, 70, 770 exactly. That's a very godly, heavenly number after our venture through Ada and Hell. So this will start on December 16th. So in 2 weeks, essentially. And the reading schedule will be online tomorrow, or whenever you're watching this or listening to this, you will have access to what the reading schedule is. It's about 70 pages a week. It's not super, super strenuous, especially because this book is all dialogue. Like with very few expository paragraphs, it's dialogue, and it moves like, I mean, people always like, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. That's okay. It's minute 54. Nobody's paying attention anymore. Like people always like get really excited about Aaron Sorkin's dialogue and how snappy and witty he is and blah, blah, blah. And I think Aaron Sorkin sucks. And this is the better version of that. This is what Aaron Sorkin wishes he could be.
Okay. Sounds good.
So
wow, hot Aaron Sorkin take.
Fuck you, Aaron Sorkin. What? I don't know why I don't like Aaron Sorkin, but I just don't. Anyways, it's all dialogue. It's very fun. It's very quick. Now, what's going to be on that schedule, though, are 3 things. There's the pages for this book, for this edition. There are also the pages for every other edition because they are different. New York Review Books reset the book, which hasn't happened before in since it came out in 73. It's never been reset. So all the other editions have a different set of page numbers. So I figured out the correlation between the two. I have both of those. And then thirdly, there is from Stephen Moore, who used to work at Delkey Archive and is like a critic of like this sort of literature and writer. He put together a very extensive website of annotations and information about JR. And that includes all the scenes, of which I forget how many there were. It's open right here, though, I can tell you. There are 83 scenes in the book. And he has it broken down by like pages and line number. And you can look at that as well. So I broke it down by our episodes by scenes and then just figured out what the page numbers were. But if you're going to follow along or whatever, you can look at what the actual scenes are according to Steve, and you can see like where the transitions are. Because some of the transitions are like in the middle of a paragraph. Like there'll be a paragraph in which is talking, then it switches who's speaking to whom, or will be like move everyone to a new scene, a new location. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you get there. But those will be the three things that are key to this. And we have a lot of people that want to come on and talk about this. So we should have a lot of really interesting guests. I know this is like a favorite book of a lot of people. It's one of my favorite books of all time, even though I haven't read it in almost 20 years. But I remember certain things about it. I was actually like fortunate enough to like be asked by the National Book Foundation for their 50th anniversary, 75th anniversary. I don't know what it would have been. But they put together a booklet of all the winners of the National Book Award, and they had people write on each one of the winners. And they had me write on Gravity's Rainbow and JR. And I was very excited to write on JR. That's like one of my favorite things that I put together, because it is a book that like, it's got a lot. It's good. I remember when I was married to my first wife at that time. I read this, and there's a character whose name I don't remember now, but all I remember is that they always have so much shit in their pockets. And it's always describing like taking shit out of their pockets and like putting it on their dresser and all this shit, all this detritus that they just carry with them. And that's literally how I lived my life at that moment in time, would be like just endless amounts of things I could pull out. And I felt just like that character. And I was like, well, this is why my wife hates me. I get it. I relate.
That's the only reason why, I'm sure.
Oh no, that is the very smallest of reasons why.
All right. Well, another great season, man. This was I was a little pissed at first when you picked this book, and I'm so glad you did. So I'm sure I have the same experience with JR as I go through that.
I am willing to bet that JR is going to be one of your favorite books.
Okay. Yeah, I'm excited to be like the virgin of this book, and everybody can throw me in the volcano.
There's no, it's interesting because it's not that. I'm going to talk about this for one more second, because I think this is important for anyone who is listening to this who hasn't read JR. JR is not the book where it's like super complex understanding, like inside references and like puzzles and complicated in that way. The complication of JR is that there's a lot of characters and there's a lot of scenes and they're not identified. You have to like pay attention to the rhythms, and it becomes very easy. It takes like almost no time before you're like, that's that character. I know exactly how that character sounds. That's how they talk. And that's what makes it really amazing. Cool. But it's much more like a takedown of capitalism. Like the themes are large and obvious. And it's not like it's hard to understand. It's going to be really fun to recap. It's a really fun, cinematic, episodic sort of book. I mean, the first lines are money, like money, in a voice that rustled. Paper, yes. And we'd never seen it. Paper money. We never saw paper money until we came east. It looked so strange the first time we saw it. Lifeless. Like, it's a funny book about money, about kids that are good at understanding how to scam things, and about like the paper car, or like the house of cards that is like the economy and the stock market. And
we're going to read this side by side with the Fountainhead, right?
Right. And that, yeah, exactly. Right.
Perfect.
I have a Fountainhead reference on for every episode. A new one. My favorite book of all time.
It's on my top 10 as well.
I've actually read that. I actually read read Fountainhead when I was in college.
Oh, good Lord. Somebody has to.
Yeah, I thought that it would be interesting to know. And then by the end, I was like, this is really boring and mean. I don't want to live in a world where people are mean like this. But anyways, okay, couple weeks.
Let's do it.
We'll be there.